Now, more than 3 years after the landmark Brexit referendum, the United Kingdom will finally leave the European Union at midnight tonight. And I've got to stress that's Brussels time. It'll be 11 p.m. in the UK, actually. And that means that Britain will exit the bloc of 27 remaining countries and the bloc's economic market of over 450 million people. Well, to help us discuss whether this exit will have any impact on South Africa, maybe even the continent, we're now joined from our Sea Point studios by Professor Gerhard Erasmus, who's an associate from the Trade Law Centre. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program. So we are literally 14 or so, 10 hours probably away from Brexit happening. We're watching from a distance. Does this affect us, South Africa?
Well, the most important thing to recall now is that although the UK stops being a member of the EU tonight, it will still be governed by the rules of the European Union till the end of this year. There is in the withdrawal agreement this thing called the transitional phase, and that runs till the end of this year. And that's the very important period in which the UK and the EU must now negotiate the really difficult and final chapter of this exercise, and that is to conclude a final deal, a trade deal, a comprehensive deal, in terms of how they will trade with each other post-December this year. For the immediate future, the existing trade agreements concluded while the UK was a member of the EU will continue to apply to us in this part of the world as well, so we will not be directly affected.
All right,
and after the end of the year, there is a so-called rollover agreement which will implement the economic partnership agreement that was concluded in 2016. So, in general terms, we are okay.
All right, so we continue to trade with Britain as if we're trading with the European Union or a European Union partner. I guess that's what you're saying. So fast forward...
Till the end of the year.
Till the end of the year. So Britain has been trying to start setting up deals in the interim with various countries. There was the UK-Africa summit more recently. Could there be, agreements in place with individual countries ahead of the end of the year, or will there have to be written in the language saying effective 1 January 2021?
Well, there is a technical problem because the UK is still functioning or operating under the common external tariff of the customs union of the EU. They can't conclude and finalize new trade deals before the end of this year. They can start negotiating them, as they did with the rollover agreement with us in SACU. But the new agreements which will enter into force from next year will be agreements in their own right. In other words, we will see possible changes to them. We will see adaptations as new needs kick in. And it's also important to remember that the agreement that has been rolled over between SACU, between us and the UK, only covers trade in goods. So, if I understand your question correctly, there will be need and space for adapting and enhancing those agreements in the future.
All right, so let's look at some key industries for us. So we export a lot of agriculture into Europe. So what will be the situation now and compared to Brexit proper when it comes to things like agriculture?
Agricultural exports are covered by their own standards and what we call sanitary and phytosanitary standards. It's about safety and health and so on. So till the end of this year, the existing standards, those of the EU and those that have been agreed between us, SACU, the 5 member states of SACU and Mozambique, and the EU, they will continue to apply. We have duty-free, quota-free access into the EU market, including the UK. Now, it very much depends on the type of agreement that the United Kingdom will, during this transitional period, negotiate with the EU. If they can come together and conclude what we call a free trade area, which will allow for the reduction or the removal of tariffs and rules of origin to a large extent, which will be covered as part of that, it will benefit us. If there's a good, easy, functional deal between the UK and the EU, we will benefit from that. We will have certainty and there will not be many disruptions. If they do not succeed in doing that, and if the UK must revert to rules of the WTO, things get complicated.
Right.
The purpose of the rollover agreement, which was concluded last year, is in fact to make sure that the rules that exist now, that have been concluded while the UK was part of the EU, that they will continue to apply in future. But then your checkpoints will be different. You can't export to Rotterdam and then have frictionless transport to the UK. It will all have to be cleared at English British border posts. So there will be changes. So let's hope they succeed in concluding a standard and comprehensive FTA with each other.
All right, so what might be the opportunities for South Africa and other African countries dealing with an independent Britain post-Brexit?
Well, in theory, an independent Brexit, that's not really an independent Brexit.
Yeah.
A UK that the UK will be independent after Brexit. It will do its own deals. The opportunities will really be locked into how we can interact with them and convince them that in this whole new series of agreements that the UK will have to conclude. You already hear that they're talking about China, they're talking about the United States, and that must be so. The UK is facing a wide spectrum of challenges in concluding new agreements with third parties outside the EU. The EU is their biggest trading partner, but for the rest of the world, they would also want to have preferential trade agreements. And I don't think we will be number one in that queue, not at all. We've got the rollover agreements. We are secure to a very large extent. There is scope for improvement, so the bilateral structures will have to be activated to see how we can enhance or increase our exports into the UK and to provide for services trade as well.
All right, and will it be business as usual then with the rest of the EU and South Africa?
Well, in theory, it will be, because the economic partnership agreement that was concluded in October 2016, that will continue to run. But that agreement as institutions for monitoring implementation, there are provisions on dispute settlement. There is a potential unfortunate development in the pipeline about the importation of poultry. So they are the typical manifestations of a trade agreement. That is normal. I don't think we should worry about that. But direct answer to your question, yes, trade as usual, business as usual, but it remains very important that this deal with the EU should be expanded to include trade and services.
All right, Prof, we're going to have to leave it there. We've run out of time, but thank you so much indeed for giving us your time and your insights today.
Well, it's my pleasure.